names, and they have a very specific written format. So, firstly, we always write them genus species with the genus capitalized. Then, if we're handwriting, we will underline, but if we're typing, we always italicize. So again, step 1, make sure it's written genus species. Step 2, make sure that the genus is the only capitalized item in the scientific name. Number 3, italicize or underline your name. This very specific naming system is called binomial nomenclature, and the actual scientific term for how we name animals tells you how we do the naming. Bi means two, like bicycle, so it is a two-name naming system, binomial nomenclature. Again, back to the panther. Part of this is because my household is a split household. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, whereas my husband went to Penn State University. And let me tell you, if you try to tell people who go to those universities that their mascot is the same animal, you're going to have a fight on your hands. Scientifically speaking, it's perfectly accurate. But this is why we have a scientific versus a colloquial. If you're a pit panther, you're always a pit panther. If you're a Nittany lion, you're always a Nittany lion, socially speaking, though the animal itself is always going to be just the same, Puma concolor. This way, we don't get into an argument. Are you a panther or are you a Nittany lion? If you're scientists, we're all under the family of Puma concolor. Now, here are some correctly written scientific names. If you say them out loud, I think that you'll be able to figure out what animal they all relate to, because there's always going to be hints in there. Like, let's look at number 1, Camelus dromedarius. It's going to be the domestic camel. See how that first word sounds so much like our common name of camel? Felis domesticus, Canis lupus, Homo sapien, Giraffa camelopardalis, sorry about that, Pantheroleo, Panthera tigris. Look at numbers 6 and 7. You know that these animals have to be very closely related because they have the same taxonomy down to the word Panthera or the genus. Diceras bicornis, Bubo scandiacus, Equus cabalus, Wonderpus photogenicus. The last one's a little hard. Once you see the name, though, I think you'll know what it is. So, what we have is the camel, the domestic cat, the wolf, the human, the giraffe, the lion, the tiger, the black rhino, the snowy owl, the horse, and the octopus. There are 3 domains. Other than a classification between things that are alive and not alive, this is the largest division, and we're going to take a look at each of the 3 domains because the organisms that are found within it are so dramatically different from one another. Basically, all life is based on the fact that you have cells, that you can pass on your genetic information, and that you can reproduce. It's basically the requirements for being alive. So, as we look into the domains, whether or not the cell has a nucleus and what kind of internal structures it has are going to determine which of the 3 domains that organism falls into. The domains are Archaea, bacteria, and Eukarya. Here are some pictures of some single cells that fall into each of the categories. There's a video under this link, and I'll put the actual URL for that so that you can take a look at the 3 domains of life after you finish this PowerPoint. Domain number 1, Archaea. These are unicellular. In other words, they're only one cell. They are prokaryotic. It means that they have no nucleus. They are a very simple organism that lives in extreme environments. They're called extremophiles because they basically live anywhere where a bacterium would die. Remember, life is nothing if not incredibly creative, and so if there's an environment that doesn't have an organism is going to find a way to move into that area. So these archaea live in really hot, really cold, really salty, really not sunny areas. You can see 2 examples on the right. Both of them are from Yellowstone National Park. The one on the top is a thermal vent, and the one on the bottom is a heavily salt-encrusted waterway. Archaea are microscopic, and here are 3 pictures of archaea. Bacteria, domain number 2. These guys are also unicellular, prokaryotic, and they also have 2 kingdoms, eubacteria and bacteria. Generally, bacteria are our decomposers, and generally they're beneficial. Obviously, we know that there are some bacteria that make us sick, but many of them don't. And think about where we would be in this world if nothing ever got decomposed. Think about how hard it would be if you couldn't break down the food that you ate in your gut. So even though we think of bacteria sometimes as a bad thing, decomposing our apple, they really are very, very beneficial to return nutrients to the ecosystem and to help you do life things like break down your food into simpler parts so that you can use it to make your body larger, to repair your body, and things like that. Here are some pictures. Some are pathogenic, like Streptococcus, Salmonella, E. coli, but some are good, like the lactobacteria that help us break down lactose products like milk in our gut. Last but not least, Eukarya, the one that you probably interact with the most, because these are going to be your multicellular organisms. These are going to be your organisms that have a nucleus or are eukaryotic. This domain has 6 kingdoms, and you can see them over there on the right. All of those kingdoms have things in common. They have usually more than one cell, generally the ability to move, and they're going to be the things that you consider to be alive, that you can see with your 2 eyes, that you mostly do not require a microscope to view. So under Eukarya's 4 kingdoms, we have Planta for plants, Animalia for animals, Fungi for fungus, and Protistas. Protistas are generally unicellular. They are the only one of the 4 kingdoms under Eukarya that are, and they are more complex than their prokaryotic cousins in the other 2 areas. Planta. Generally multicellular. There are a couple of very few examples that are not. We're going to leave those out for right now. These are our autotrophs. In other words, they use the sun to make their own food, and they generally cannot move. Animalia, animals. Multicellular, heterotrophic. In other words, they eat something else to make themselves able to live. In other words, they could be vegetarians. In other words, eat only plants. They could be omnivores, like you, eat plants and other animals, or they could be a carnivore. In other words, they eat only other meat. Fungi, generally decomposers. In other words, they live off dead, rotting organisms. Also, like plants, they cannot move. Protista. There are some examples on the right. Probably you've heard of the amoeba, maybe the euglena. They are generally microscopic. They are heterotrophic or autotrophic. In other words, they will eat other microscopic organisms or other microscopic plants, and they can move. You can see that several of them have tails or cilia that allow them to do that. The tails are called flagella. Analyze and classify. Now we're going to practice a little bit. This is the type of chart that you're going to eventually see that's going to help you analyze how related certain organisms are. So just take a moment to look at the three categories: black bear, domestic cat, and lion. You notice that every single one of these is related down to the order. The bear, the cat, and the lion have their lowest classification together as carnivora. After that point, the black bear breaks off, and the domestic cat and the lion go on to be related down to the family level. If you think about what these three animals look like, that should make sense to you. Domestic cats look more like lions than they do like bears. But a domestic cat is clearly not a lion, thus they divide out at the family layer. The cat goes to Felis, the lion goes to Panthera, Panthera leo for the lion. But think back to when we were talking about the other scientific names. You know that you had Panthera tigra. Think about how much more similar a lion and a tiger look than a lion and a domestic cat. That's why lion and tiger have one more layer down of relation, unlike the cat, which is only related down to the family. Which of the three organisms are most closely related, and how do you know? Hopefully you remember that the answer to that is the lion and the domestic cat, because they have more of Linnaeus's classifications in common. At what level do the black bear and the lion separate? Hopefully you remember its family. At what level do the lion and the house cat separate? Genus. Which are the most closely related? The horned owl, the speckled owl, or the snowy owl? Take a moment to look over the chart so that you can answer that question. Where did the names become different? Hopefully you noted that the snowy owl and the horned owl are the most related because they have up to the genus in common. At what level do the horned owl and the speckled owl separate? At the genus. At what level do the snowy owl and the horned owl separate? At the species. After this point, there are some questions you can go through and ask yourself to review. I won't do them on the video, but they're there for you in case you'd like to look through them.